Hello everyone, welcome to a grossly unprepared and unqualified college student talking about angels. So, disclaimer to anyone who's watching, I am not religious. I was raised Christian, but by being raised Christian, what I mostly mean is I went to church for Easter and weddings and funerals, and that's pretty much it. So if I get anything wrong in terms of the actual biblical details, feel free to call me out because I know nothing. However, what I am is an avid consumer of media and a nerd. Those two things might actually, be the same thing. But I have noticed a lot of common trends in portrayals of angels over the past 20 or so years. And there are a few common archetypes of angels that have come out in the past half century. Some of those are following in the trend of the tropes that were established with It's a Wonderful Life, with the angels being guardians of sorts that are protecting and assisting individual humans that also sort of serve as like fairy godparents of sorts. Some are chthonic, terrifying beings that are partially based off of the descriptions of angels in the Bible and Dante's the Divine Comedy. I was about to say Inferno and then went to Paradiso because that's where angels are actually described, and then realized that was stupid and I should just say the one that everyone knows. And some are incredibly ambiguous, whether or not they're good or evil, whether or not they're beings of God or a completely different creature entirely. Sometimes they want to bring about the apocalypse. Sometimes they are malicious. Sometimes they're good-hearted but naive. There's a lot of room for variation, and no one's really nailed down the typical depiction of angels. However, there are 3 popular television shows the past 2 decades that all follow a very common narrative arc with angels. Those 3 television shows are Supernatural, which ran from 2005 to 2020 and traumatized many, many souls. Good Omens, which is based off of the 1991 book of the same name by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett, and which came out from 2019 to 2023 and is releasing its final season this year, I think, and Hazbin Hotel, which released its pilot in 2019 and its first, the series on Amazon Prime in 2024 and is continuing on for a few more seasons. All 3 of these are religion-based or religion-inspired, and all 3 of them feature protagonists or deuteragonists who are angelic beings who all follow a very similar character arc. Those 3 angels are Castiel from Supernatural, Aziraphale from Good Omens, and Vaggie from Hazbin Hotel. If you run in the same circles of the internet that I do, you're probably already familiar with at least one of these, but in case you aren't, I'll give you a brief overview of the series before actually going into the analysis so that you know what on earth I'm talking about. Warning, spoilers are ahead. So, the basic plot of Supernatural is that there are two brothers, their names are Sam and Dean Winchester, and they travel around the country hunting monsters. Some of those monsters are demons. And then in the 4th season of the show, Dean Winchester gets brought back from hell by the angel Castiel, and it turns out that, actually angels exist, and also the apocalypse is happening. And the rest of the series, spanning from season 4 to season 15, is angels play a major role in the story, as do demons. It takes a significantly more biblical, but critiquing of biblical, turn. And Castiel, very quickly when he was introduced, became incredibly popular and one of the protagonists of the show, partially because anytime that the producers tried killing him off, ratings would immediately drop until they brought the angel back. He is incredibly queer-coded. His relationship with Dean Winchester is... They are the first slash fiction couple on Archive of Our Own to pass 100,000 published fanfics. It's intense, and the suspicions that he was queer were confirmed in episode 18 of season 15 when he confessed his love to Dean and then died. We don't talk about that, but the point is that boy is 100% queer, and this comes across in a lot of elements of his story. A lot of what aspects of queer he is are open for interpretation. There are some suspicions, there are some headcanons that he might identify as gender non-conforming, and others that he might identify as asexual, which represent. But there is no denying that he is in love with another man. That is incredibly obvious throughout the course of the show. Good Omens, both the book and the television show, are about the chaotic and ultimately relatively useless attempts of the angel Aziraphale and the demon Crowley, who have been friends since the Garden of Eden, attempting to prevent the apocalypse from happening. Aziraphale and Crowley's relationship has been debated over since the book was released, with the creators confirming that it is intended to be queer, although what brand of queer exactly is up in the air in the book. In the television show, it is explicitly confirmed to be romantic attraction as of the 2nd season. And in the book, there's a heavy amount of implications that Aziraphale especially is, if not gay himself, then queer-coded very heavily, with one of the direct quotes that I have memorized from the book, because it is an incredible line, is, he was British, he was intelligent, and he was gayer than a tree full of monkeys on nitrous oxide. And Vaggie from Hazbin Hotel is a member of the group of angels called the Exterminators, who go down to hell every year with the job of killing as many people as humanly possible. Vaggie is an angel who rebelled against those orders and fell, and she is a lesbian in a relationship with Charlie Morningstar, daughter of Lucifer and Princess of Hell, who is attempting to prevent these exterminations by allowing souls a chance at redemption. All three of these characters are very heavily queer-coded, and I would make the argument that all three of their character arcs represent in different ways the story of someone breaking out of a queer person breaking out of a highly regimented religious community. A lot of my arguments are drawing off of the research that I've done into Christian nationalism and evangelicalism, especially. This is intended solely to be talking about those highly strict religious communities and not any other form of Christianity. So, popping back in a few days later to actually talk about the main plot of the video, because what is time? What is meaning? In terms of the actual character arcs that all three of these angels exhibit, the first trend that they have is that they are presented as outsiders within the religious community, the heavenly host that they are a part of. Castiel is described as being an angel with a crack in his chassis. Vaggie is looked down upon for having compassion for the denizens of hell that she is supposed to be tasked with killing, and Aziraphale is pretty much looked down upon for any number of things, including his outfits, which are far more older and countercultural-y than the straight-laced suits that the rest of the angels are wearing, and the fact that he enjoys eating and participating in other human activities, and that he spends time on Earth and appears to care about humans. There is definitely, in religious communities for closeted queer people, a feeling of being wrong, a feeling that something about you is inherently off, even if you have not realized that you are queer yet, or even if people in your community have not realized that you are queer yet. This is largely because of the idea that any misstep from the guidelines that are enacted by those communities will lead to judgment. And in many cases, as is shown by these characters' journeys, it does. Whether that comes from insults, or awkward statements, or threats, or even just like a feeling that something is off with you. All three of these characters are outsiders in their original communities. They don't really have any friends. And a lot of the time, they are actively insulted by members of those communities even before they start exhibiting traits that mark them as more prominent outsiders and rebels. Secondly, they face severe punishment, oftentimes amounting to exile, for anything that goes against the stated goals of that community. And a lot of times this is connected back to a queer relationship that they have with somebody. All of them do face homophobia. When Aziraphale is targeted and almost sentenced to death at the end of season 1 of Good Omens, it is partially because of the fact that he worked to stop the apocalypse, and partially because of the fact that he did it with the demon Crowley, who he has had a millennia-long close relationship with. Castiel constantly gets mocked by members of the angelic forces for having a close relationship with Dean Winchester. Oftentimes before he even realizes that he is in a romantic relationship with Dean Winchester. That's a common thread in the series. Queerbaiting! It's fun for the whole family. And Vaggie is subject to some things that are blatant homophobia and some things that are shielded in allegory. One of her angel co-workers, Lute, when she returns to heaven with her girlfriend Charlie, says that the love between the two of them is vile and blasphemous, which could either be a reference to the fact that she's in love with a demon or the fact that she is in love with a woman, and this is backed up by the fact that Adam immediately seconds it with hot as though. It's also interesting that although all of them are targeted for this relationship, many of the times it comes across in different ways. With Vaggie, it is being blackmailed because of her old connection to the angelic forces into not assisting her girlfriend, pretty much instilling the fear of God in her. With Aziraphale, it is almost being sentenced to death, and then when the execution method doesn't work, exile. And with Castiel, it is conversion therapy. For those of you who don't know, conversion therapy is a very intense method of attempting to basically therapize the gay out of somebody, and in Supernatural's case, over the course of season 8, that is very much what happens. There are scenes that are very similar to a lobotomy that are attempting to force Cass to sever all connection that he has with Dean to the point of trying to kill him. This is portrayed as conversion therapy in every way except explicitly stated, which really nails the point in home of how close to extremely severe religious communities that is, because even though conversion therapy is technically illegal in a lot of different parts of America, it is still a thing that religious communities do, especially. If being gay is treated as a criminal sin, then obviously the person who made you feel gay is attempting to lure you into sin, and you have to be convinced that that is wrong so that you can become holy again, which is something that is very definitely happening over the course of those few episodes. There's also a strong coming-of-age idea amongst all three of these characters, and something that is very familiar to people in religious communities, especially queer people in religious communities, going to areas outside of their realm of influence for the first time. I'm largely thinking about college because that's what a lot of the academic papers cite, but honestly it could also apply to moving to a large city. You meet people who are outside of what you were typically taught of as good, and in Vaggie's case especially, you interact with people that you were actually taught were evil, because Vaggie fell and ended up in hell, and so is spending the majority of the season interacting with hellborn denizens and learning to overcome the prejudices that she has, and learning to connect with them and make friends with them in a far closer way than she made friends with anyone in heaven. There's a lot of confusion, but there's also a lot of realization that, oh, this thing that I thought was bad is actually something that a lot of people go through. And there's a lot of relating to people that you were previously thought of as alien, as many people in extremely evangelical communities are taught to think of basically people who are not part of that religious order specifically, to the point where it often excludes other sects of Christianity. With a lot of evangelical communities, there is a belief that Catholic people have not fully accepted the word of God. And the realization that, oh, this person who I was taught to think of as wrong in every way possible, as someone who needed to get taught the way of good and light, is actually helping me, is a very familiar trend throughout all three of these narratives, and is a very familiar trend for people in these communities, LGBTQ people especially, who are learning to become more comfortable in their identity and identify with people who are teaching them that what they are isn't wrong. And lastly, all three of these characters find a greater form of connection with people within those separate communities, within the queer communities. The communities that they were split off of because of where they were born and who they were allied with. This is something that's incredibly important. All three of the characters find connection and fulfillment through queer relationships that they could not find in their old religious organizations. For Aziraphale, it's his close relationship with the demon Crowley. The two of them understand each other on a level that is incredibly deep and, while not explicitly confirmed to be romantic, it's either romantic or queer platonic because, yeah, no, that's not just friendship. Castiel's able to break out of the and is able to use that love several years later to save Dean's life and save the world. And Vaggie, through her relationship with Charlie and through her connections with the other members of people in the hotel, is able to regain her wings and fight against the organization that she used to be terrified of. All three of these stories are very different in terms of how they handle these character arcs, how long they take, the specific steps involved, but all of them follow very similar paths. And all of them are intrinsically hopeful about queer people who were raised in extremist religious communities. The idea that you can break out, that you can find people who accept you for who you are, and that you can find support and joy in your own identity, that's a very worthwhile lesson to teach, and I'm very grateful that they're around to teach it. We all say that representation matters, and I feel like everyone knows it, but there's something about representation that goes on below the surface that isn't quite as blatant, that is also equally important. And in this case, if someone living in an extremely evangelical community watches Good Omens and is able to find confidence and faith in their identity and in how it is portrayed through Aziraphale or with any of the other shows that I described, I think that says something very important about the necessity of representation indeed. And I think that this is definitely something that needs to get looked into further. Thank you for listening to my rambles, and I hope y'all have a nice night.